Okay, here we go. We're going to look at completing the square. I noticed the first part of your exercise, they just want you to figure out what's the value of C would be for it to be a perfect square. What they mean by that, remember before when we were factoring and we'd end up with x plus 3 and x minus 5, let's say, for our factored form. What they call a perfect square is where I'd have an x plus 3 times an x plus 3. It's a factor times itself, and we would write it like this normally, okay, meaning I have two of those, okay? So they want to get to this is when they say a perfect square trinomial, okay? They want it to be something with three terms, 1, 2, 3, that I can break it down into a perfect square. In other words, it's the same on both sides, okay? All right, so because a square, each side's the same length, right? So remember when we did Punnett square before? Okay. All right, I won't confuse you too much. All you have to do is first make sure the only thing here is an understood 1, okay? Which that's what they start with on these first few. They're an understood 1 here, so there's nothing you have to do. If, and we're going to get to that in a minute, if there's a number here, let's say it was 2, for example, then I'd have to divide everything by 2 first, okay, and get rid of it, okay, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, I don't have anything in front of y squared except for an understood 1, so all I have to do now, this is considered my A term, my A value. This is considered my B value, and this is obviously my C value. So when I talk about ABC, A is whatever's in front of y squared, B is whatever's in front of y, or x, or whatever variable, and C is whatever I'm adding or subtracting at the end, okay? So all you have to take is the B value, in this case, negative 14, and every time, doesn't matter what it is, every time you're going to divide by 2 and square it, okay? So negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7, and negative 7 squared is 49. So that becomes my number there. That becomes my C, 49, okay? So looking at this one, I picked this one because now I don't have a number in front of m squared except for understood 1, but now I'm dealing with an odd number, right? I know 2's not going to go into it evenly. I still do the same thing. I take that number, negative 5, divide it by 2, and square it, okay? So now, if I divide that, I get negative 2.5, okay? If you like dealing with decimals, that's fine, or you can deal with fractions. Doesn't matter to me, all right? I'm going to go ahead and say negative 5 squared is 25, and 2 squared is 4. So that's what I'm adding on each side. Now, if you like decimals, 4 will go into 25 6 times with 1 left over, so it'll be 6.25, right? So either the fraction or the decimal doesn't matter to me, okay? Whichever you like. Most math teachers prefer you use fractions, okay? Because sometimes decimals are repeating and then you're rounding and it's not as accurate. So they normally like fractions better. But they're equivalent. They're the same thing, okay? So that's the first part, okay? So let me erase this. Once you take that in, take the number in front of the variable that's not squared, divide it by 2, and square it. That's what you're going to add behind it, okay? Now, we're taking this and we're going to expand it to a whole equation, not just an expression. You remember the difference between an expression and an equation, right? Okay, remember expression, there is no equal sign. You're not solving anything. You might be simplifying, that's it. An equation has an equal sign and you're solving. Okay, so you had a couple of these. Or 3 of these. I picked one that was pretty basic, and then I picked one with a number in front of the variable, so that way I can show you what to do. All right, so we're going to start off with y squared minus 12y plus 26 equals 0. Okay, so like I said before, make sure there's nothing here. except for an understood 1. In this case, we're good. So I don't have to worry about that. And I'm going to show you one in a minute where I do. So the first thing I want to do after that is I want to isolate the y squared and the 2y. I want to get them by themselves on this side. So I want to move any numbers or anything else away. So I'm going to say minus 26 to the other side. Okay? Good so far? Okay, so that's y squared minus 12y. Now leave a little space here because we're going to add something like we did before on the front. Equals negative 26. Okay, leave that space open. It'll make sense in a minute. Now, just like we did on the first part, we're going to take this value here and we're going to divide it by 2 and we're going to square it. So negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6, and negative 6 squared is 36. So I'm going to add 36 here, but if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. So I'm going to add 36 over here. Good so far? Okay, now negative 26 plus 36 leaves me with 10, doesn't it? Okay, so that side's done for now. Okay, now back over here, I want to write it as something squared. Okay, now I'll show you a little trick. Remember earlier when we said negative 12 divided by 2? We got negative 6. Whatever you get here is going to go here. Okay? It's just a little quick trick. Because negative 6 times negative 6 will give me 36, right? And negative 6 plus negative 6 will give me negative 12. Remember before when we factored and we talked about that? Okay, but that's a shortcut. Whatever this ends up being before you square it is actually what's going to go right here, okay? Because it's a perfect square. Now, I can treat it like I did the last video where I took the square root of both sides, okay? So if I square root this, that's y minus 6. If I square root this, I can't square root 10. It's only 5 times 2, right? Not a pair or anything, so I bring it down, square root of 10. Put a little plus or minus there in front of it, okay? Now all I have to do is add 6 to the other side. So y equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 10. And there I solved by completing the square. Okay. And you could get a decimal answer here. You could put it in your calculator and say 6 plus the square root of 10. Okay. Let's see. That would be about 9 point something. And then 6 minus the square root of 10, which would end up being 2 point something. Because square root of 10 is a little more than 3, right? Okay, so that's the basic, right? Now let me show you the other one that you have where you don't have the variable in front by itself, okay? So we good on that? I'm going to pause this video and I'm going to do a separate video on the other one.